on to live now. Good evening again, everybody. We have one apology for absence, and that's from Councillor Marcy Skeet. We wish her well. Hope that she feels she continues to improve, to get better. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Raise your hand if you have. Nope. Minutes of the last meeting. Can I take them as correct? Just do a thumbs up if you are. Yeah, that's grand. That's marvelous. Okay. Then so straight on, I'm going to take item 5 first. The reason I'm taking 5 first is because it's 2 reasons. First of all, I don't think it's particularly controversial, but I think it's worth us listening to. And second of all, because it's not just our policy, it's part of a joint policy between the 3 councils that are part of the licensing company. Helen, will you talk us through any salient points in item 5?
Okay, I was all ready for.
I know.
Hey, yes, basically, this is a review of Merton's massage and special treatment policy, which is something that came in under the London Local Authorities Act 1991. Because we are now part of a 3-borough partnership, we're reviewing a lot of our policies, and massage and special treatments is one where we were very different in the way we operated across the 3 boroughs. So we have effectively, I've got to take my glass off actually. We have effectively looked at the policies of the 3 boroughs and tried to pick out the best that we have in all the different boroughs. And with regard to Merton, we look back and we don't think there's any record of massage and special treatments coming to a licensing committee in the past, and you can correct me if I'm wrong there. But I think the conditions in Merton were quite, they were not particularly detailed. They were fine and they worked very well for Merton, but when you looked at what we could do, we felt we could make the environment safer for the public and clearer for businesses if we made them a little bit more structured. So we're introducing some more structure into the conditions, and we're reviewing all the conditions, and we're also going to review the fee structure as well. And the fee structure was based in the 3 boroughs, it was all different. We've decided to go with the structure that where you prioritise the actual amount of time. So we're going for more of a direct cost recovery model rather than a model based on the size of the premises, on the number of therapists, because we think it more accurately reflects the actual cost of running the scheme. So that's why we're moving to a different fee structure. And I suppose I better clarify also what a massage and special treatment premises is. Do you want me to talk about that just a little bit as well?
Say that again, sorry.
So what actually sort of the premises we're talking about? So basically we're talking about premises where you are performing sometimes quite invasive beauty treatments for people. So although there's obviously the massaging, we're also talking about tattooing, laser treatment, piercings, and we're not talking about earlobe piercings, we're talking about more significant piercings. So we're talking about treatments that are actually quite high risk, and so it's very important to have a good regulatory regime in place to make sure that you're protecting your public effectively. So that's why we've decided to review it all. Does anyone have questions? How do you want to take this? Do you want me to ask? I have to say,
well, I'm going to see
meeting like this. I don't know how you.
I'm going to see if anybody's got any questions. I believe Stan Anderson's got a question. Stan, can you unmute Stan? Ooh. Amy, is she there? Can I unmute? I can't unmute him. We have a. Is Amy?
We are just trying to unmute him, Chair. You might have a prompt on your screen, Councillor Anderson.
Ah, yeah. It's the technology, Stan. Stan, you've got to unmute as well if you want to ask the question. He's in it. I think he's still asking his question. What do you reckon?
Yeah.
Anybody else got any questions while we're waiting? Oh, Stan.
Yes, I'm back with you.
Have you got a question?
Yes, I just want to know what cover or what insurance these companies have to take out to cover the work they're doing. Is there a special insurance?
We're introducing a condition that they do have to have liability insurance for up to £2 million. And we're making, although I don't know if anyone has read the standard conditions in the report, and I know it's quite lengthy and it's not very exciting, but it does give quite a lot of clarity for people as to exactly what's expected of them. So yeah, there's a specific requirement on insurance as well.
Fine. Does anybody else have any questions on this report? Now, I have just one for you, Helen, and that is, as I've just said at the beginning, we're just one of the committees this has got to go through.
That's right, yes, yes.
So how long before this actually comes into practice?
Well, we were hoping to bring it in a little bit sooner, but obviously all the massage and special treatments at this present time are closed, and we
That's
want,
true.
yeah, there's no statutory consultation. It's not like the licensing policy that comes later where there's a proper statutory consultation process, but we do still want to consult with the business, and we think that's only right. So we're going to wait till they're open, and we're hoping to bring a report back in October this year to Merton, and to have the regime in place as soon as we can with regard to new businesses, but the businesses who are already operational will change it as they come up for renewal. So we want to give them a little bit of time to make any change. I don't think they'll need to make many changes, but we want to give them some time to get used to the new regime.
I think I've got Agatha first and then David. Agatha, question?
Yes, the fee structure, does that mean that the fees are going to go up a lot more, or they're just going to be?
And we think that for the more high risk premises, so the tattooists and those that do the piercings and the laser treatments, that we may go up a little bit, but for the lower risk premises, it'll go down a little bit. So it will balance out overall. But yes, there will be some movement on fees because people at the moment are being charged for the size of their premises.
So it's just going to be changed from premises to the amount of people you have inside, or
it'll be down to the risk, yeah, the risk associated. Because if we do an inspection of a tattooist, for example, it's quite an in-depth, lengthy process. They are what we would call a high-risk premises, obviously because it's a blood process, and there's a potential of blood spillage. So it's quite a medical process, effectively.
So what do they? Have you spoken to the owners? What do they think about it?
Well, this is the problem at the moment. You see, we can't because they're closed. So which is why the whole process of review has been put back slightly. So we are going to consult with the businesses.
Although we don't need to insult.
No, we don't actually need
we will consult.
We can just implement the changes ourselves. It's not a statutory process, but we feel we would like to engage the businesses.
I think that's really important.
Particularly this time
with businesses, under the cosh, as it were. Councillor Simpson, David, you wanted us to ask a question. Can you unmute David?
There we go. I think Councillor Kohler also wants to get in because he's.
Oh yeah, he can come next.
That's fine. I just wanted to know, Helen, roughly how many businesses are affected across Merton?
There are 15 massage and special treatment premises at the moment that have got licenses. We do think there's quite a few that are not licensed that are operating, and that's another strand of work. Which we had just about started before lockdown, to be fair, and now of course everywhere is closed. So, but we do think that there are quite a lot of businesses that aren't licensed. So it'd be interesting to see whether the publicity that's generated around this encourages some more people to apply for a license.
So how do you find out whether these practices are taking place in an unauthorized way?
Well, it's just, I mean, a lot of it's just Google searching, and people having a list. I mean, we've got the list of the 50 that we know have got the license, and then we can look around and see if there's people who are not licensed.
Thank you.
But yeah, that's something we have planned for all 3 boroughs. But yeah, we definitely know that there are premises that aren't licensed in Merton that will need some attention.
Okay, thank you very much.
Paul, Councillor Kohler. Go on.
Hi, thanks. That was my question, actually. So just to carry on with that idea, are we are we anticipating putting much sort of more pressure on businesses with this, or will it be overly bureaucratic? I'm just conscious of businesses really struggling at the moment. I don't want to put more burdens on them. So do we see this being particularly burdensome?
I don't think so. I mean, the regime, as I said, if you read the conditions, actually a good business would be delivering on all those conditions already. You know, they would have client records, they'd have washed hand facilities, they'd, you know, the premises would be clean, and they'd have a disinfection regime for their equipment. You know, like if they're doing piercings, they need autoclaves or ways of making the equipment clean. So they should have all those systems in place already. It'll be different for them, and we're not going to be prosecuting anyone who is struggling with, you know, some of the paperwork or something. But we do also have an obligation to the public as well. So we have an obligation to the businesses, but also to the public.
Yeah, sure.
Seems fair enough. Joan Henry, Councillor Henry wanted to speak. Can you unmute?
Thank you. Okay, thank you. My question is, from experience, having been an hairdresser and have my, you know, own salon in time passed by. Okay, we look at 3 categories. And of course, you have the iris and the low risk. The eye, which is the one that deal with blood for piercing, goes on and on. Hairdresser maybe comes on the second, you know, iris, because of course, using the products that they have to use. And the low risk, you know, I don't know what that comes under, because if you're dealing with people who do, for instance, nails, that comes on the iris too, because they have to clip the nails and you have to use instrument for those. Right. The insurance for iris is very high comparing to low risk. And if the insurance, they're paying a surplus amount in insurance, why is it that, of course, we're charging different rates? Why couldn't it be just one rate and the insurance which you charge? Because you see what I'm looking at, it's gonna be a massive price, because iris insurance is much higher than the low risk insurance. So if you look into that and see how we're not going to really pinch someone financially.
Is there anything there you can answer, Helen?
I mean, all the fees need to be on a cost recovery basis when you're looking at massage and special treatment work. And if you have a high risk premises and you need to do a lot of work with them to make them safe, then it does cost the authority money. So we do need to make sure that we recover the cost of the service.
Yeah,
so that's why we try to weight it in proportion to the amount of time that we would spend with the business. But I mean, I do accept that insurance is expensive. I appreciate that.
I don't want to dwell too much on that particular point. Has anybody else got a question more specifically about this report? No? Okay, I've got just one, Helen, and it's more procedural than anything else. It's just we're making a decision tonight, obviously, dependent on, you know, we will be consulting, etc. What about the 2 other councils concerned? And if they haven't made decisions yet, do we still go ahead?
Well, we've got a committee report. Well, we've got a committee slot booked in Richmond in June and in Wandsworth in July.
Fine, okay.
And to be honest, I don't think the regime is changing in Richmond a little bit more, because in Richmond they currently have therapist cards. I don't know if anybody knows what I mean by therapist card. So that's quite an old. That's old fashioned. Let's put it that way. So each individual therapist used to get a plastic card, but the problem was obviously people change salons and move around quite a lot, and it was very difficult to keep on top of it. And also, in the end, it was effectively the local authority guaranteeing that therapist was qualified and suitable and they had the right experience qualifications, whereas actually that responsibility has to be with the business. We can't take the responsibility of the therapist, it has to be the employer. So that's what's changing in Richmond. There's not so much changing in Wandsworth, to be fair. It's quite a similar regime already.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, because this isn't going to come into effect until April the 1st, 2021, provided we get that far, then, you know, we've got plenty of time for all the boroughs to do it and to get any consultation done that you want before we get
started. And to be honest, I can't see anybody who won't agree with what we're proposing, really, because we're just trying to make it I said that I mean, we've introduced quite a lot of new conditions about nail bars because that's quite a new process, and 10, 15 years ago, nobody went to have all the acrylic nails put on. So there weren't the regulations or systems around it, but we do have to put conditions in around that now. So we've tried to update it basically, and to make it a bit clearer for the businesses. So we've got quite clear, you know, if you have a nail bar, this is the ventilation you need. This is the chemical you mustn't use. You know, although it looks like it's quite a lot of detail there, it actually is helpful for the business to know what they need to do to get it right.
I think David wanted to come in. Is that right? Did you? Can you unmute Councillor Simpson? Can't hear him.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I can hear you now.
That's better. I'm very glad you can hear me. No, I just want to say I think it just sounds very, very sensible. I'm not sure we need actually to spend any more time on this evening, and I would propose that we adopt this.
Well, basically, I second what Councillor Simpson just said there, and on that basis, do we all agree with recommendations on page 65? Oh, hang on, no.
Yeah, one more hand up here.
Councillor Moulton wants to speak.
Sorry, apologies. I just have one very quick question, and that's we've got a list of bodies that are exempt by being granted exemption. I mean, we're happy with that list, are we? Because given what you're saying about all the, you know, invasive procedures and blah blah blah, I appreciate many of these are covered, I guess, under a different under the various physiotherapists and so on. But we're happy that these are all bona fide and good.
Yes, and they are reviewed. There's a London group, and they are reviewed. The list is reviewed to see whether it's still appropriate. But that would include, so for example, like a dentist, is able to give people Botox, but obviously a dentist has a lot of other, you know, it's already regulated by the Dental Association, and their hygiene and their infection control techniques are already regulated by somebody else. So we don't need to go in and check a dentist to see whether they could do Botox. It would be a waste of time, really.
Okay.
Right, I'd like us to move on if we can. Are we all agreed with the recommendations on page 65, agenda item 5? Yeah? Okay, yes. There you go. We've got one thing done. Who says
one down?
Right. I now want to go to the larger report, which is the draft statement of licensing policy. And I'd like us to do it in two goes. I'd like us to look at Appendix A, first of all, which is basically what we've got already. Is that right, Helen?
The Appendix A is the draft license. That's the policy that came to the meeting in February. It's the same, the changes that we talked about in February.
So that we've already agreed.
We have, well, we've discussed it. There's not a huge amount of change in it, to be honest, from the existing licensing policy. The main change is with regard to Wimbledon Village.
With regard to
that's the main change. I mean, there are a couple of changes if you want me to.
Would you mind, just for the sake of the committee, going through them very briefly, and so we can talk to that, because it'd be nice to get that out of the way so we can talk about the main part.
The changes with regard to the licensing policy as is recommended for 21 compared to what is now. Basically, I mean, we've added a glossary. There's a section in there about film classifications. If somebody wanted to have a film that hadn't got a classification, then there's a possibility that they can do that. These are quite niche changes, really. And there's also the proposal that we could, if we wanted, have a model conditions, which Merton doesn't have at the moment. So model conditions would be that, say, when we go to licensing committee, and Simon, who is here somewhere, would be able to say on this. So when we go to committee, it can be helpful if you've got model conditions. So the licensing officer can propose conditions that might be suitable given the circumstances. So obviously you take conditions for an operating schedule, and you can't impose conditions, but you can recommend to the committee that there are model conditions that might be suitable in those circumstances. It does mean you can get a little bit more consistency. But I have to say that it's not we would have to work it up. It just is giving us the option of doing that in the future. We haven't got it all set up yet, but it's just allowing us to do that.
Okay, that's great. Any questions about those 3 changes? No? Excellent. So that part of the report, I think we appear to be agreed on. Now let's get on to the recommendations, which is what they are, on the cumulative impact assessments. And we have 4 recommendations. The 4th recommendation is that we don't go beyond the current cumulative impact zones, which are being called assessments. So we're not talking about Morden tonight, we're not talking about Collier's Wood tonight, and we're not talking about any other parts of the borough. The only 3 parts of the borough we're going to talk about are Mitcham, Wimbledon Village, and Wimbledon Town. And so those are the three areas that we're going to discuss. And the first one I'd like to take is Mitcham, because Mitcham, to me, is the most cut and dried. The report it suggests that we don't change from the current cumulative impact zone, and I think that the assessment backs that. What's it called? The cumulative impact assessment backs up that recommendation very thoroughly. Does anybody want to speak to Mitcham? Well, first of all, Helen, have you got anything to add to what I said there?
No, I mean,
I agree.
Go on. No, I think that there was a lot of evidence. I think personally, one of my colleagues produced the report, and she has got a lot of evidence. I personally think it's a good report. It covers a lot of areas, and I think it's quite clear in Mitcham that the issues that were identified in 2016 remain. I don't think it would be justified in removing that at the moment.
I entirely concur. What does the panel as a whole think? Are you all in agreement that Mitcham stays as it is?
Yeah,
Agreed.
Yeah, it looks like a general agreement. That's fantastic. The second one is slightly more controversial in that that's Wimbledon Village. Now, Wimbledon Village, I don't know how long we've had the cumulative impact zone there, but it's one of the areas in Merton that has the least problems of drunkenness, antisocial behaviour, etc., etc. And correct me if I go wrong, Helen, but I think trying to keep a cumulative impact area there would be untenable. And so the report is suggesting that we remove that. First of all, I'll take Helen first, then David, I've seen you there. I know you'll want to speak.
I think it partly comes because the legislation has changed, and Simon might be able to help me on this, our legal advisor. But it's a different position now in that you have to do a cumulative impact assessment rather than designating a zone. And in order to do an assessment, it does mean that you have to gather the suitable evidence to justify your decision. And then if somebody wants to challenge you, which people are entitled to challenge at every point that they want to introduce a new premises, you have to be able to show that you have the evidence that the zone is needed. And there's evidence that we have found so far simply wasn't there.
That is.
I mean, if you go through the report, it's quite clear that there isn't the evidence there to maintain it. Because it used to be that there was a rebuttable presumption, and Simon, I might have to ask you help on this, but a rebuttable presumption that when you had a zone, nobody would be allowed to open a business. But my understanding is under the new legislation that came in 2018, that actually that doesn't happen anymore. So every new business still has the opportunity to make an argument that they should be allowed to open up.
Yes, previously we had these cumulative impact zones which weren't set out in the legislation, and a lot of councils adopted these zones. And so the government has now put it on a statutory footing to say you must publish your cumulative impact assessment. Now, I did look back to see, well, this zone was designated in 2006, and it could be that, well, I'm presuming at that time there was evidence of cumulative impact, and it could in fact be that the policy has had an impact and improved the situation such that now it's because areas can change over time. So now we have to publish this cumulative impact assessment and consult on it. And now, previously, we were allowed to say, well, we'll have a rebuttable presumption. And I always used to advise the committees, in effect, it's a reverse burden. Normally, for a new application, the applicant's given the benefit of the doubt, or not the benefit of, but it's, you know, presumption is grant, perhaps with conditions. It's more in favour of granting with conditions if they're a new operator. But with if the premises is in a cumulative impact zone and you had a rebuttable presumption, that would be one of refusal, or with certain stringent conditions before you would grant. So it's a slight shift away from almost an automatic grant, but more towards refusal, unless they can satisfy you that there wouldn't be a negative impact. But what the government is now saying is that if you do adopt a cumulative impact assessment, and it's actually in there as well, that you're basically then setting a strong statement of approach to consider applications, and that there are still a number of premises, I'm just reading the Wimbledon Town Centre, such that it is likely that granting further licenses would be inconsistent. But it's not, but the government guidance now does say that we should treat, or the committee should treat, applications like any other application. So you can grant it if you feel that's appropriate in that case. So it's just a slight, it's a shift away from presumption of refusal towards keep an open mind, but we have got this cumulative impact assessment, which gives a strong intent. So it's quite difficult to explain. We'd have to do it case by case basis. It's approaching each one on a case by, but there's not this reverse burden now, so to speak. It's more open mind, but within the background that in these areas you have got a strong presumption of refusal.
Thank you. I'm going to take David first because you had your hand up long back.
Yep. Thank you very much, Chairman. Basically, the report is quite right. I mean, there's nothing there in the village which says right now that we have got a problem, and there clearly hasn't been a problem for a wee while now. There will be people in the village and maybe in nearby wards who will have a view through the Wimbledon Union of Residents Associations, if nothing else, and who will seek to change our minds through the public consultation. So forewarned is forearmed, but quite clearly the policy has worked over the years, and to that extent we should be very happy that the policy was there. But the policy is now changed, and we have now got to have a proper assessment, which wasn't necessarily the case, it seems to me, when we produced the cumulative impact zones back in 2006. The first two were, of course, were Wimbledon Town Centre and the village. And it's taken a long time actually to move on to get the one in Mitcham, for example, that in 2018, which I fully supported then and still support now. So I think that all in all, that we should just move forward. The Act is quite clear, and it will be up to local residents if they wish to challenge us through the public consultation, so to do. But I don't think there's anything else that we can really say on this matter, quite frankly.
Really helpful, David. Thank you very much. Anybody else got any questions on or statements on Wimbledon Village? Stan, this is Wimbledon Village, yeah?
Yes. When the consultation finishes, will you be dealing with any of the responsible authorities there?
They will be part of they will be consulted as part of the process, yes.
Yeah, because of the lockdown, weren't able to consult with them before.
It's been more because it's been quite tricky. I mean, obviously there is a statutory timescale with regard to the licensing policy in Merton, and it has to be reviewed by January 21, which is when the new policy needs to start. But we've ended up with this unusual situation where all the licensed premises have been closed for several months. But they are going to. We've got a 12-week consultation period from now, and I'm really hoping that licensed premises are going to be opening sometime. Well, who knows, the end of this month or next month. And some of them obviously are open already, aren't they? So, so there will be a time within that consultation period where premises are getting back to some sort of normality.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Agatha, Agatha.
I do agree with David. We must be, aware that we will get people from Wimbledon, various groups challenging and wanting things back to normal. But it's understandable that it's going to be removed because, as David, there isn't an issue there at the moment. So I think we'll go for that anyway. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much. Joan, Councillor Henry. Can you unmute Joan? Can't hear you, Joan.
Going into lockdown.
No. I think she's pressing her button to... Amy? No, don't worry, Nigel. None of us can hear her. I don't know what's happening there. Oh,
She is.
she's back in the room.
Okay, I think Ellen, it's the consultation will be the best because for a period of time. So we can't just go ahead and say, okay, we're going to remove it. You need to give time, also a period of time. Say, for instance, the 6 months and see what happens, because the summer coming up, on, see how things going to change. Because no matter what we do, or what, there are times when somebody get out of hand or something get out of hand. So we don't want to remove it and then later on say, okay, we have to put it back.
I hear what
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
And if I mean, with regard to Mitcham obviously brought in a cumulative impact zone in between reviews of the licensing policies. It doesn't have to tie in with the licensing policy. If problems did start to escalate again, I'm not saying they will. I've no idea what's going to happen with the licensing. I don't think anyone can predict at the moment how things are going to go. But if there was an issue that we needed to address at any other part of the borough, we can do that at any time if we feel we need to.
Okay.
Just to
sounds
point
good.
out, sorry, I'm trying to turn my camera on, but I can't do it to get your attention, Chair. I was just going to point out, it does, as stated in the report and the Home Office guidance, just because there isn't a cumulative impact zone or assessment in place, and I have to correct myself, the test now is obviously strong statement of intent, not presumption, I think I said at the end. It doesn't stop somebody or a person who's objecting to still raise an issue of cumulative impact if they've got some evidence. So, for example, if they're keeping a noise diary, or they've got, or the police have got some particular concerns about that particular premises that's applying. So it doesn't mean that the issues still can't be raised or addressed by the committee when they're coming to consider a premises within that area. So I think that's quite important just to stress that point. And also because there's a shift on the other side as well, because it's not a strong presumption of refusal now, it is a strong statement of intent. So those can go the other way. So it's bringing things a little bit more towards the middle and giving you perhaps a bit more discretion in that sense. So.
Thank you very much for that. Now, on the basis of what you've heard, unless anybody else has got anything they particularly want to say, are we happy with what the report recommends as far as Wimbledon Village is concerned?
Agreed.
Wimbledon Village,
yeah, fantastic. That's marvellous. We're getting through this. We've only got one bit left to do, and of course I've left the most complicated to last. It may not be complicated. This is Wimbledon Village. We've got, Wimbledon Town. We've got a cumulative impact zone at the moment. It's worked very well. I'd like to raise something which isn't specifically in the report, which is to do with competition, if you like. Wimbledon Town is our biggest, I don't know what you could call it, cash cow, if you want. It's our biggest tourist attraction by on an annual year-round basis. It's got theatres, it's got restaurants, it's got everything. It's where people want to come, and it's where we want to encourage people to come. But just because we've got it doesn't mean that other boroughs don't have it, and so we are in competition with other town centres, particularly, for instance, Kingston. Croydon's coming up on the edges there, and of course once you start going into town, you've got places like Putney and Clapham and places like that, which I wouldn't want us to fall behind those areas on the basis of something which is too restrictive. Now, you've heard what our legal officer, I'm terribly sorry, I keep forgetting your name, has said about applications. If we have the zone as it is at the moment, it means that Wimbledon can't easily get any more licenses, either for, well, no, Paul, you tell me if I got things wrong, or Helen will as well, but it will make it more difficult for Wimbledon to expand, to keep up with the market, as it were. That's in my opinion. Now, first of all, I'd like to bring Helen in on that, because I could be completely wrong. I often have been in my work life. And second of all, I'd like to bring you guys in, because of course there are many other considerations as well, including the fact that Wimbledon is a largely residential area.
I have to say I'd have to take legal advice on that. I mean, obviously, if you have got the cumulative impact area, it does mean that has to be considered with every new application. But as Simon said, it doesn't mean you can't grant a new license, but you have to bear that in mind.
Okay.
But
sorry.
I think the thing is, with any area, you can't, it has to be up to the business as to what sort of business they want to apply for. It's quite difficult for the authority to say that I want to air towards a restaurant, or I'd rather have pubs, or I want nightclubs, or whatever they want. It's quite difficult for the local authority to direct who applies. In the end, it's somebody, they want to set up a business in a certain area, they think this is going to work for me, and then we have to deal with the application as it comes in.
Okay.
I do think that Future Merton are very keen to try, and particularly at the moment, I think we're all a little bit concerned that some premises that have been closed for the last 2 or 3 months aren't going to reopen, and that is a worry for restaurants and pubs and even the massage and special treatment premises that we talked about earlier. I think there is that worry. But it's a call, and I don't think anybody really knows the answer on that.
Thank you. I've got David Simpson first, and then I've got Nick McLean, and then I've got Agatha.
Chairman, I would be very reluctant to take away the cumulative impact zone in Wimbledon Town Centre. It's been long fought for. There are residents close by who feel very strongly that actually it ain't strong enough. And I think for us to remove the safety net that there is right now, simply because we're concerned that some premises may not open again, would be wholly wrong. I think it would be an absolute travesty to take this safety net away from the residents who live near to the town centre of Wimbledon and who would be very adversely affected.
Thank you very much. I've got Nick next, and I got Agatha, and then I got Pauline.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I have nothing more to add than what David Simpson has just said. I completely align with him, and I nothing more to say. I don't agree with removing the impact zone.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's very helpful. Agatha next. I've seen you, Una. Don't worry, you're next, and then Paul after you.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with David what he said. I don't think we should remove it. You know, it took a while to actually get all these things in place, and it doesn't stop us from, you know, anybody applying for a license for something. It doesn't stop us from giving them the license. It's just that it makes us more careful of who and what we're giving the license for. And they would, you know, sort of put conditions. So I don't think it affects it in any way at all to support new businesses, as long as we think that it's the right ones.
Okay, I've got Pauline next.
Hello. I agree with David on this point, because and Agatha, this has been fought for so long, and we've got it, and it's working. So don't take it away. If it ain't broke down, don't fix it. I know what you're saying about competition, but with the impact zone in place, it's a far nicer place to be in the afternoon and evenings than it has been.
Okay, thank you very much. It's Una next.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I hear what you have to say, Nick, but I totally support my colleague David and so on, and what others have said. In addition, I would highlight that the police would probably also be quite concerned if this was changed. And I think having fought, as colleagues have said, to have it, residents are particularly relieved at it. And like Agatha said, at the end of the day, if it doesn't stop anyone from putting in their application, and we can look at it and judge it and see whether they put forward the right mitigation. In fact, we had that at just the last subcommittee, didn't we? We didn't agree that application should go in, but that doesn't mean to say that in the future we wouldn't do if there were better mitigations and so on. But I think would be wrong of us to take it away from the town centre. That is.
Okay.
There's a concern there. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Paul. I've got Joan after Paul.
Sorry, yes, this sounds a little boring, but I agree with my colleagues. I think it would be disastrous for the council, actually, among the residents of Wimbledon. They would feel really abandoned if the council was seen to do that. And the point that's been made, of course, is the law has moved on. We've removed the presumption. We're just saying this is our concern. If you want a license, address this concern. That's all we're saying to the market. And that strikes me as a sensible position to take. Frankly, I don't think it's going to be our worry, because anyone running these places now, 2 meters is impossible. 1 meter is probably impossible to make money out of. So I don't think we're going to have loads of bar owners trying to create bars here anyway. But I think saying that says something to the residents of Wimbledon. Look, we understand your problems.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've got Joan next.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to come back from history. I mean, I had been a special constable in Wimbledon, Merton, since 1996 up to 2011, and I know the challenge we had during those times coming up to 2011. And what I would say, take it away, it would be a problem. And of course, as you see, everything changed nowadays, comparing those days to now, and residents got used to having that peace and quiet. And I think we should allow it to remain as it is. At the same time, listen to residents and see what we can put in force to support them whenever they put an application in, and guide them around that. But we shouldn't go back and take away what we already put in place.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody who hasn't spoken yet? Mary, did you want to come in?
I agree with what David, Una, Agatha says. I think it should remain.
Fair dues. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who hasn't spoken who wants to speak at the stage?
Chair, just from the legal point of view again, sorry, I think you've probably picked this up already from your comments, but just on page 64 of the report, it does state there, the second paragraph at the top, again, just makes it clear that the CIA does not fundamentally change the way that licensing decisions are made. It is therefore open to the licensing authority to grant an application where it considers it appropriate and where the applicant can demonstrate in the operating schedule that they would not be adding to the cumulative impact. So it would be on a case-by-case basis, on a judgment as to what the applicant presents to you. So that does apply to Mitcham. That also applies to Wimbledon. I think I just added that.
Well, I found that very helpful. I don't mind being a voice of one, just for having raised that. And frankly, at my age, You know, I like a nice, peaceful town centre, well, time will tell. I mean, we have to review this in 3 years' time, don't we? And so, if in that time, under the new regulations, Wimbledon is seen to be falling behind its competitors, then there'll be plenty of time, particularly in view of what Paul and Nick and David have said. Businesses are going to take a long time to get back on their feet anyway. So very happy from my own side of things to leave things as the report suggests. Now,
yeah,
on that basis, colleagues, can we okay the whole of this report, or does anybody want to say anything before we do so? Dave's happy. Everybody's happy. What?
everybody happy?
We
Yeah,
have
happy.
come, colleagues, to the end of the. Have we not? Have we? Am I right? Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Have we reached the end?
I think
Yeah.
so.
We have. Well, colleagues, thank you very much indeed. I think we're done.
Well done.
Well done.
Well,
Thank you very much, everybody.
congratulate yourselves, not me.